Happy Holy Hump Day on this January 12th, everyone. I'm Pastor Robert. Welcome to this midweek time where I can share some spiritual thoughts and reflections with you. Also, Happy New Year. And I think that's very appropriate since we're only 12 days into the new year. So Happy New Year. And that actually ties in with our focus for today. I want to talk about one of the more well-known of the daily devotionals that you can use for your daily scripture reading, and that is a devotional called My Utmost for His Highest. It includes 365 daily readings, and it was written by Oswald Chambers, and I'll talk about that devotional book in a little bit, and I'll share with you the January 1st reading in which we get the name for this devotional book, My Utmost for His Highest. But I first want to talk a little bit about who Oswald Chambers was. He was a remarkable person. He was a Scottish minister and writer, and he lived in the late 1800s and into the early 1900s. He only lived to be 43 years of age. He died from complications from an appendectomy. And so when early in his life, he went to London, England, where he started a Bible training college. And through that Bible training college, they were able to produce 40 Christian missionaries, which is pretty incredible. Well, then World War I broke out, and he decided that he felt called by God to go to Cairo, Egypt, and work there at the YMCA in sharing Christian devotional talks. And he also continued to write there. And he ministered primarily to the troops from Australia and New Zealand. And after he died at only the age of 43, his wife went ahead and put together all of his writings and the talks that he gave. And she produced, I think it was 30 books. She had 30 books published under his name. One of those books was this daily devotional, My Utmost for His Highest. And I think it is the most popular devotional book even through today. And it's never been out of print. There's actually a more contemporary language edition, which is the one I have here. This is actually my wife's Oswald Chambers, My Utmost for His Highest devotional book. Mine is, I think, more of the one of the original language copies. And so I'd like to go ahead and read his January 1st, the first day of the year, daily reading, where we get My Utmost for His Highest as the title for this devotional book. And you'll hear Oswald Chambers, and not just on January 1st daily reading that we're going to hear in a minute, but also in other daily readings, he talks a lot about giving your full 100% effort in trusting in God. And he uses a lot of words like surrender and yielding. And I think that's so important for us to realize, because sometimes we want to control things so much, where really what we need to do is to surrender and yield to God's direction. So here's his January 1st reading, and he always has a verse to begin the daily reading, and they're short readings. So it's Philippians chapter 1, verse 20. It's where the Apostle Paul writes, My earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed, but with all boldness, as always, so now also Christ will be magnified in my body, whether by life or by death. And then he writes this about that verse for January 1st. My utmost for His highest, my earnest expectation and hope that in nothing I shall be ashamed. We will all feel very much ashamed if we do not yield to Jesus the areas of our lives He has asked us to yield to Him. It's as if Paul were saying, my determined purpose is to be my utmost for His highest, my best for His glory. To reach that level of determination is a matter of the will, not of debate or of reasoning. It is absolute and irrevocable surrender of the will at that point. An undue amount of thought and consideration for ourselves is what keeps us from making that decision, although we cover it up with the pretense that it is others we are considering. When we think seriously about what it will cost others if we obey the call of Jesus, we tell God He doesn't know what our obedience will mean. Keep to the point. He does know. Shut out every other thought and keep yourself before God in this one thing only, my utmost for His highest. I am determined to be absolutely and entirely for Him and Him alone. My unstoppable determination for His holiness. Whether it means life or death, it makes no difference. And that's from Philippians 1:21. Paul was determined that nothing would stop him from doing exactly what God wanted. But before we choose to follow God's will, a crisis must develop in our lives. This happens because we tend to be unresponsive to God's gentler nudges. He brings us to the place where he asks us to be our utmost for him, and we begin to debate. He then providentially provides a crisis where we have to decide for or against. That moment becomes a great crossroads in our lives. If a crisis has come to you on any front, surrender your will to Jesus absolutely and irrevocably. So there you go. That's a very typical reading that you get through the other readings throughout the year from this devotional book, My Utmost for His Highest. But I just think that's incredible. And I thought it was interesting where he talks about, a crisis. And sometimes when we go through a crisis in our lives, we get so anxious about it. And that's natural. But Oswald Chambers is saying maybe that's an opportunity to allow God to shape and mold us, to help us to yield even more to God and to be even more faithful to God through that and to trust God even more. So I offer that to you, this January 1st reading, as we continue to think about this new year. I invite you to join us for worship this Sunday at Athens First United Methodist Church, either 9 o'clock in our chapel, 10:30 in our sanctuary, or also 10:30 live stream on our church's YouTube channel. It begins actually at 10:25 so that you can see the announcements of the church scrolling through before we begin our worship at 10:30. So join us for worship. It will be a Sunday where our theme will be more Christmas gifts to open. And it's going to be based on the Apostle Paul's letter to the Corinthians, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, where Paul talks about gifts that we each have. So hopefully we will open those gifts as we gather for worship this Sunday. So may God bless you as we dedicate ourselves to offer our utmost for God's highest.